Welcome everybody. I've got Ike, I've got Eric, I got Chris. These guys are so knowledgeable. Really looking forward to the panel today. And in your app, you will see our deck. And advance notice, we will not be going through our slide deck presentation, but you may use it for questions or just for resource afterwards. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves and why they are an expert here. So I'll start with myself, Suzanne Livingston, co-owner of RWM Home Loans with my husband, Brad. And we've been in the retail lending space for 30 years. And, thank you. So, Chris?
I'm Chris Hilliard. I'm a CEO and founder of Winnow Solutions. If you look at your name tags, well, I don't have mine on currently, so that was fun. If you look at your name tags, we're on the name tags, and we're a big supporter of CMBA, so just very happy to hear it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Of course, definitely.
Yeah. Eric?
Eric Blumberg. I'm founder and CTO of Astrokey. We consider ourselves a data security company trying to change how data is stored and how it's transmitted.
Hello, everybody. This is Ike Suri with Funding Shield. I'm the CEO. We are a fintech, mortgage tech, cybersecurity firm helping prevent wire fraud, title fraud that leads into compliance and every other fraud and risk needs that the industry needs. Nice to be here.
With full transparency, Ike, I've known you and your firm for over 3 years.
Yes.
And prior to working with Funding Shield, unfortunately, we had wire fraud to the tune of $250,000 to a first-time home buyer, and it was tragic. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thanks for giving us a business.
So we're gonna jump into it, but from a lender's standpoint, every time I turn around, it seems we need to be doing something else with cybersecurity. And in the last quarter, I have seen more cases of, it's just the cybersecurity threats are increasing and they're getting better at it so that my employees, despite any education that we have, any training, any reminding, that the multi-factor authentication, MFA, it's not working because they're using our Microsoft, channels, and it's looking so much like our own verifications. So how do we protect PII? How are we going to stop people from getting in, despite our efforts?
I'll start the conversation. I mean, it takes a village. I mean, when it comes to risk and cybersecurity issues, dealing with such complex landscape in the mortgage industry, and with all the complicated interconnectivity, the data is touched so many times. There is no silver bullet. There is no one single solution that can solve the problem. So it ends up being the transformation that we're going through today. And it's done quite well over the last few years when you look at and you compare the past years, where solutions that are for each workflow helps manage risk in a way that is safe, secure, seamless, and the data is transferred from one party to the other in a manner that is minimizing what we dealt with in the past. But it's still not enough because none of us are on the same platform. Not everybody's using Microsoft Office, for example, and even they have issues, right? So it is a complicated situation. There is no silver bullet, but we can address the parts that we're covering between us.
So I'm a techie, and I love sci-fi. So my analogy is, I watch Star Trek and all these things, and you always have a force field. And we're putting force fields around our data. And the problem is, if you watch it, shields at 100%, shields at 80%. Put life supports to the shields. So it's inevitable that intruders are going to get in. So what we need to do is start thinking of how we transmit the data, make it secure, change how we store the data, so when they get in, even if they're doing one call every hour so you don't pick it up, that they have to make calls that you can pick up as an intrusion and stop them.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. It's something you've got to be very proactive about. It's important to really understand and vet your vendors as well, too. I mean, we have some wonderful ones on stage. That's just a shameless plug. But the thing about it is, you can put everything in place, as you mentioned, you can put everything in place, and you're still going to have someone get through. Someone's going to be smarter than the system, but the thing is, you do need to ensure that the proactive measures you're taking are not only prudent for the risk profile that you have. So there's going to be some data that doesn't necessarily have to be protected, at Fort Knox or whatnot. But if there's data at rest that has NPI in it, you need to understand that that is a high risk. That's a high risk piece of data. It's a high risk database. Ensure that the vendors that you have behind that are protecting it. You've got people on the front end, you've got monitoring ongoing, and then you have periodic audits as well too. And you need to also consider the human element. Oftentimes, the weakest link in the chain is someone that left a laptop unsecured at an airport, someone that's using a Wi-Fi hotspot that's not, doesn't belong to LAX. It says LAX_free Wi-Fi, not LAX-free Wi-Fi. So those are the things you also have to ensure you train your employees about.
That's great. We had talked about maybe reviewing some of our cybersecurity insurance, and we may not be covered for what we truly think we are covered for. So.
Yeah, so the insurance policies that we all have now make us feel warm and fuzzy, and it's good and everything else. We pay a lot of money for it. The issue is so many folks have not read the entirety of the policy. And as Ike will probably tell you in a minute, every insurer will do everything it possibly can to show where your security broke down, so they don't have to make that payment. So the important part is to go back, look at your policies, read them, see if they're inclusion or exclusion policies. Ideally, they're exclusion policies, because then everything that's not stated is completely covered. Now, those are hard to get. They're hard to pay for sometimes as well too. But ideally, you don't have a small list of things that are covered and a giant list of things that aren't. And then also really understand the insurer. Look at the rating of the insurer. Look at the reinsurance market behind that insurer. They will give you that information. If they don't have a good reinsurer, if they're not, with Lloyd's of London or something like that, you need to question whether or not there's liquidity at that insurer that may be touching, $600–700 million at a time at each company. You need to understand that there's enough money behind them to pay for claims.
Yeah, I can add to that. I mean, as you rightfully said, the insurance industry right now has put the industry into a position that it's so expensive from all different angles, from lenders' perspective and also from buyers' perspective. We were just at the legislative day up in Sacramento, and we were addressing this issue that it's putting a lot of hindrance in current market season, where buyers who can't afford to get it or not qualifying to get it, the sellers have to figure out how to still make a sale. So insurance is all through the industry, the journey of this, starting from applying to all the way to the end. The insurance industry right now is in every workflow hindering transactions. And beyond that, of course, rightfully said that when you look at the small footprint, you feel good about having an insurance policy, but it's not really covering what you want. For example, we are in the closing business, ensuring at funding shield standpoint at the close. It's not just about checking that there's insurance, but it's also about ensuring the level and kind of insurance, and are they able to support the dollar value of business or closings that they're doing? Do they have enough coverage? So all that matters. And in this market, it's very important to look into it and verify it and ensure that you're going into a transaction where if something goes wrong, you've got right coverage too.
So it's scary now because the insurers are pushing back. So a good friend of mine has a business where he comes into companies, and when they're getting errors of omission or SOC or SOC 2, which helps you if you get hacked, that insurance covers you. So the problem is that you have people filling out these forms for an insurance company, and they don't answer the questions correctly, or they say, I'm going to do this soon. So then when they get hacked, there's a couple cases now where the insurance company is not paying them, but they're also countersuing the companies because they lied on those forms.
Yeah.
So it's a big problem that not only you don't get insured, but now you have to be really careful that are you actually answering these questionnaires right to get the insurance,
Right.
because they don't want to pay.
That's an example of check. Right?
I very rarely mention that but I actually am a licensed insurance broker. I don't practice or anything like that. It's one of those things I got 7,000 years ago, and I've kept it up. But every time you sign an insurance document, it is under penalty of perjury. So there is a private cause of action for the insurance companies to go after you for lying on those forms, and they'll invalidate the whole policy. So you, like you said, you paid for years and you get nothing from it.
And then you have to pay them.
And exactly. Then you have to pay them. More than likely pay their lawyers' fees as well too, and they don't just go to Joe's strip mall attorney. So you're gonna have a lot of money out the door for something that could easily be corrected by just having a conversation with the rest of your team. You're right.
One thing that I've always wondered about is we deal with so much personal private information, and we deal with quite a few vendors as well. And although I have a, vendor, program, and I ask for their financials, it's like, how do I go to DMI, for example, and really do a proper, thorough investigation of my seller servicer? How do we protect, because we have so many highways of information of our customers out there, and you guys talk about pathways and encryption, but what does that future protection, do you think, look like?
So I think it looks like change. You have these systems that are 20, 30 years old. So in our view, I think the change is that the consumer holds their data to start. And you secure that on their device. And only they can access it from that device. And you store the data separately. So there's no reason that the financial profile should have anything else except an ID or a key. So even when you're passing that financial data, it should never have the personal information. So those vendors have to allow you to pass the financial with an ID. So even if it goes over the wire and someone gets it, it's useless because they don't have the information. Yeah. But then there's also this idea that it's overkill to encrypt the data. So when people say we use industry standards to encrypt the data in transit, almost everyone's using HTTPS as the vehicle. But you really need to encrypt the data beyond that and have a key that changes every time you go back and forth. Yeah. So what you want to do is they're going to get in, but make sure that if they get in, it's so hard for them to see anything that's meaningful.
True, very true. I mean, as I said earlier, we're going through this transformation. So the industry's gone through this last 4 or 5 years of increase in cost for origination. That by the time you come to a closing, you're already out $14,000 worth of time and money. And so applying more and more tech is very helpful. But if tech cannot be a spend but be a tech save, that would be more useful. And I think we're getting there when it comes to encryption, that, as you referred, because we are a fine example of that. We're dealing with very sensitive information when it comes to actual exchanging of representations, warranties, and the actual cash, the day when it's going to be wired. And until the industry is ready to very quickly adopt, embrace, and cost-effectively use encryption in a way that it's not necessarily a high spend, because we saw a few years of us the industry pursuing blockchain thinking it's a solution. Not really. And the analogy I ended up using was I used to be in a business that was fiber optics business, designing and manufacturing fiber optics codecs. And it was designed for Wall Street, for trading, and then on for publishing and broadcast systems and surveillance systems. And the ideology there, or idea, is the same, where you take data of all different sorts, audio, video, and so forth, and you convert it into light. And if someone wants to penetrate and steal that data, they're only going to get light. They're not going to get any data. You can only decode it on the other side. And so now you're talking about someone buying both those codecs. And you cannot do that in the mortgage industry because there's so many disjointed, disparate parties involved that you can't have everybody on that single platform. And so what ends up happening next is that what the industry is going through transformation right now, which is going to be tokenization of such information, so that that QR code, which started off as a barcode going back to the 90s or 80s, is going to end up being that encrypted code that you can exchange because it's been certified, verified at a moment in time. And then it might need routinely audit to make sure that data is not stale. which goes back to what Chris was alluding to earlier, which is part of, we find it to be very important to be positioned in time, in lack of all those things being used today, positioned in time, just like another analogy I'll use, before you get on a plane since 9/11, your luggage and you are thoroughly checked, that nothing is going in that shouldn't be in there, infected. Same thing in pandemic. You're not going into the hospital if you've got a fever and cough and so on. So when it comes to data, which is our life nowadays, digital life that we live in, money's transferring in those means. When it comes to time for that exchange, an instant real-time source data audit is quite important, because things we're talking about are not really deployed today. They're coming. We're in the middle of that transformation. So we find ourselves positioned in that place.
It's like a parallel universe, I really feel, when I talk to you guys. It's going to look quite different.
I feel terrible I don't have a sci-fi reference I can go to really quickly right now. I mean, I could probably pull something out, but I'd add one thing as well, too, that I think dovetails off of everything that you guys have said, is that also when you get the budget for the vendors and you get the vendors onboarded, you get them integrated, remember that you have them. You know, there are times, and I will speak from personal experience. I don't like this story, but it actually happened. We had a company that was a subscriber, and they had a lot of turnover. So everyone that had access to my platform was gone. And then the folks that were still there didn't use it for a year and a half, and we're not monitoring that. I mean, it's not something that we can take about, and they get an auto renewal notice, and like, what do you mean, we had this to use? Yes, you had this to use. Ensure that there are cross-functional teams in your organizations that know what vendors, what services are available to you, because once you pay the money for those, you're keeping them until the end of that contract. So you should get the value out of that and ensure that everyone in the organization that can use it does get the value out of that as well. It's a
Where
weird
was your
story.
sales rep, Chris?
No, my sales rep's sitting in the audience, and she's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I have nothing but wonderful things to say about that. But we care about your privacy, so we don't monitor the usage on a daily basis or anything like that. So otherwise, I would have mentioned that to the users. So she's great. She's wonderful.
So what's really interesting in that use case, there's like Datadog and there's CrowdStrike, really expensive, right? But in that use case, when they used it, abnormality detection, meaning you now have a security risk because it's not a constant use case. Right. So all of a sudden it went down and it jumped up again, it's an alert. So those are the type of things that using that great AI and that technology can actually let you know it's going. And what you have to be careful of is the logs you send can't have any personal information, right? And like, I'm like this in a Datadog ad, but they actually have services that will, if you send it in and you use that other service, which you pay for, it removes all the personal information if you can't do it yourself. So there's a lot of tools out there that help, and it's this detection that becomes such a big deal.
It sounds like Mission Impossible that Tom Cruise uses.
Well, for those of us who are on Microsoft 365, I do know that we updated to something called E3 and E5. And what it does do, it'll throw a red flag alert for something that is not within our usual scope of business. So if something is transferred from outside of our area, outside of our country, it flags it, and then our system goes through, let's say, I was the person that was flagged. It'll go through everybody to make sure that it hasn't gotten into our system. And what we found, and we've only been on it probably 30 days, is that there were some breaches or attempted hacks prior, because it can historically say, ooh, this doesn't look right. So definitely, if you're a Microsoft user, I would talk to your IT department and see if that might be beneficial for you, because they are getting so sophisticated. It's hard to catch, and it's hard, with all our employees, and sometimes they have a bad day and they don't look at where the email's coming from exactly, and they shouldn't have clicked on it. But having a really good IT company too, I think, is very important, that we can forward our emails to, and they get back immediately and tell us if is that fish or it's actually okay. You're fine.
You got to enhance your cybersecurity, not enhance your risk or concerns.
A couple questions. This one came through our audience on the poll, and you guys, I haven't discussed this with you, so it's your free one here. How do you guys think AI could be leveraged in the future to increase, help us with this cybersecurity threat?
I was asked this question just about a week or so ago, and I'll sound a little pessimistic on it because at least our business is about preventing a wire fraud and title fraud, the biggest purchase of someone's life. And one error is one too many. We're not in the business of statistics that AI can give us 95% efficacy. We need to be 100% all the time. So when we look at AI, we look at it from different optics, that it's not going to help us catch AI, but AI can help us, enable us assisting customer service perhaps, right? So AI has to evolve a lot more than where it is today, and it needs proper guardrails. And so as we get deeper into it, hopefully it'll give us better comfort on that we can rely on AI to prevent. It can maybe tag, it can't remediate. So our business is not about just identifying, preventing, and then remediating as an embedded solution. And that's very hard to do for AI today. Because as you know, in closing, there's so many parties involved. Not everybody's equipped with technology that will allow you to figure out where the problem is coming from and how do you go fix it, because at that moment in time, you need a whole lot of different doors to go through to talk to the people or to find real-time source data in a manner that tech was unable to do, but was able to flag. So for us, it's a different kind of an answer.
AI can make a huge impact in any number of cases, but again, and kind of going along with Ike's point, you need to implement it in a way that's responsible, and you need to implement it in a way that's actually going to benefit you. So if you're looking at things like front-end real-time compliance checks on applications, ensuring that things are within tolerances that you've disclosed what you need to disclose, things like that, that's very, very helpful, very important. You can use AI to do that. If you're using AI in underwriting, and I talked about this here last year, if you're using AI in underwriting, you need to be careful because whatever data you're having it learn off of to help you in that credit box, you need to make sure the data that it's learning off of wasn't biased in the first place. So it's one of those things that if you're learning from bad data, if you're learning from biased data, and previous underwriting decisions were not made correctly based upon something that then down the line caused a disparate impact, that's going to continue to happen and happen at a much greater scale if you have your AI learn from that and then help you in your underwriting. So in implementing AI across numerous things, don't just check the box saying, yes, I want X vendor plus AI, and it costs more and you feel good, I got AI. No, you need to understand exactly what the models are doing with the data you're feeding it.
Right, responsible. Yeah, with guardrails.
So in my opinion, it's always, for any new technology, it's crawl, walk, run. And AI, invest now, because it's just going to take over a lot of things. But to your point, right now, AI, machine learning, it can flag things. As I said, it can detect abnormalities. It can detect inconsistencies in data. Where there's a problem that I pass data to you, did you create the inconsistencies? So that's a problem. But what it can do is it can alert you that something's not right, and then you still need the human to review it. Yeah. It's not at the stage where you can walk or run, but we can't fear it because it's not going away, and it's not going to take your jobs away. It's actually going to enhance your ability to do more and do higher level stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
But right now, yeah, it's
word
crawl.
I was careful in articulating that in our business, we can't afford one error. Yeah. But it does assist the systems in so many different ways because it's a much faster, and it is an advanced machine learning the pattern to figure out where to flag, and then someone expert can really be served on a platter to go solve the problem, right? Totally get it. Yeah.
That was a good question. Does anyone else have a question who's out there in the audience that you've been dying to ask these guys? You've got a very, very good team up here.
These lights are bright too, so you have to say something,
Yeah.
noises, something, throw something at us.
We'd like to beat the record of one question, which has been today. So even if you want to know how we spell our names, I mean, whatever.
This is when future leaders, you just got to make up something. You just don't really,
Or something off
raise your
topic.
hand.
Where are my future leaders at?
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, right here. There's some.
Yeah.
Well, I've got one.
Really good enthusiasm,
I was reading
guys.
through the
Perfect.
slides.
My gosh.
I was reading through the slides, and I had no idea what a synthetic ID was. Eric, what is a synthetic ID?
A synthetic ID is something that you generate on the fly, and it's unique, and you would use that ID every single time. As I said earlier, you create an ID, the ID is linked to, let's say, me, consumer, and my app that's accessing it, and then when it communicates with the server, that's how you protect everything. And every time it's a new one. So even if someone figures out how to break that, it's only good for that one transmission, and the next one, it does it. And that goes to the updates.
Yes.
So what's really important with all this, because the data's live, once you start using Plaid or any of these other things where you're getting live data, every time the consumer pushes the data to the system through the app, it's now live, accurate data.
Yes.
So you need to protect it, and then those IDs, it's overkill. Like I hear from my team all the time, isn't that overkill? Nothing's overkill.
No.
Right? So as I said, it's the table stakes. Everyone's going to use HTTPS. Everyone's going to use, encrypt their database. But are they encrypting the fields inside the database? And is each field encrypted with a different key?
Yeah.
So it's more work for you, and it may add a couple of milliseconds to your servers, but it makes it so hard for when that guy breaks your force field to get something useful.
I think
So
if you
true.
got to take one quote from this panel, it's Eric's, "Nothing is overkill." That's very accurate in this day and age.
Yeah.
Well, I was shocked too. I was looking at Ike's slide, and in terms of all the fraud protection that's done, and especially over our CPL letters, closing protection letters,
Yeah.
like 45% are.
It's gone up in a
are
quarter.
bad.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. So that means you need a checker for the checker. That gets quite laborious and expensive. So tech there is very useful. It's optimizing that ability to be embedded in the transaction to flag and then resolve and remediate. So, but it tells you, unless you're checking, you don't know. It's like a lot of clients, until technology recently is being embraced, until it started getting embraced in the last few years in this industry, as KP said earlier, archaic technology in this industry, right, which is going through its changes. Until you open that closet, you don't know what skeletons are in there. So a lot of clients basically don't want it. They said, we haven't really faced a threat or a fraud yet. It's too late when it's done. And the cost of that has gone up to $1 million, even though you might have just lost 350. What about the reputational loss, right? That too.
And then the other point too was, and these are all on the slides you guys can bring back to your companies, but agents unlicensed,
Oh my God.
escrow companies with no E&O. They really shouldn't be doing any business. And what's the cost of that, Chris? Because from a legal standpoint, there are liabilities on that we increase our exposure at that point.
Yes.
Right, and unfortunately, not all of that is quantifiable because of the amount of parties involved, as well as the volume of things going through. But you're 100% right. I mean, if you're not checking that, if you're not regularly checking it, I mean, as much as vendor management may be overkill, it's not overkill. You do need to do those periodic things, and for your core vendors, honestly, a quarterly vendor management check is not out of the question. Some of them you might need to do monthly, unfortunately. It's one of those things that if you have a vendor you can't do business without, and that vendor goes down or that vendor has a breach or whatnot, you should have a backup in place for that vendor. I've identified who can step in and take that, and you should be able to, within a certain number of business hours, migrate your business over to that vendor in order to keep going. If not, besides the cost of liability and everything else, you've also got business interruption expenses as well too. And oftentimes insurance companies don't want to cover business interruption as well.
Well, this just happened recently with, Fidelity having that breach, and the markets were at a pause for several days. Transactions were held back because the systems are down, and guys are trying to close a transaction, and they can't get a response. They're waiting. It was back to the days of like, you have to make a phone call.
What's a phone call?
So our team had to go through, and we're probably not the only one, whoever's servicing the industry and clients, had to go through customized solutions to be able to look into transactional history, to be able to have comfort on data that was real-time still, because data at rest, as you said earlier, is also at risk. So if you go into looking at your data from a quarter ago or a year ago, you don't know if they're still up, running, or maintain their licenses, or have been sold, have merged, or new one came up with a new name, or same owners. You have no idea. So real-time source data eliminates a lot of those risks, and that's what the industry needs, and that's what is part of the transformation we're talking about. How do you prevent risk, fraud?
So here's a simple thing for a question for everyone. When you look at your vendor contracts, how many vendors let you take your data with you if you cancel without a big cost, or do they let you take it with you? Because that's a lot of ways they keep you in. They give you emails that you can't take, they give you phone numbers you can't take, and all of a sudden, a change becomes really expensive.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this has been an amazing panel. Chris was at the MBA, and he flew in to be on this panel because he wanted this to be his lasting impression of a fun, outgoing panel.
Chris.
And I appreciate Eric being here because he was our last-minute substitution for Chris, and Ike is a good friend for over 3 years now, and it was kind of fun. It was like we were just hanging out and having a conversation, which is what we wanted to do. And please don't hesitate in coming up to any of us at the cocktail hour later.
Yes,
for
it's
the Campac reception
Campac
or
tail.
whatever.
That's what they call it.
Thought that had already
Campac tail.
started.
Campac,
No,
yeah.
has it started yet?
Yeah.
Well, it's is there going to be a campfire or marshmallows to roast or something?
Kind of sounds like that, doesn't it?
Thank you, Susan.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
moderator.
Thank you, everybody.